You know,
In June, Dick the Bruiser is featured. In the first card in June, it's Dick the Bruiser and Ox Baker in the Texas Death Match. And the second card in June, it's Jack Briscoe versus Dick the Bruiser in a double countout at one fall each. That's a good finish that used to be done in the 70s all the time.
all the time. Yeah.
One guy each has a fall, and then you have a double countout at the end for the champion to retain the title. What was I never got to see Dick the Bruiser in St. Louis. What did Dick the Bruiser mean in St. Louis?
Dick was St. Louis today. If I take you to St. Louis and we drive downtown anywhere and walk down Washington Avenue anywhere, and you just pick any random person you want and say, "Are you a wrestling fan?" And they'll say, "Oh yeah," most of them will, and they'll say two things. They'll say, "We grew up, my parents grew up, my grandparents grew up on wrestling at the Chase, and they loved Dick the Bruiser."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, religiously. I mean, he was St. Louis, and Sam knew that, and that's why Sam knew when to use him. He knew how to put him in there. Uh, between you and I, Dick wasn't that good of a worker.
Right, right.
He didn't have to be.
Yeah, he was a brawler for sure.
He was a brawler. Yeah, at the Coruscant room at the Chase Park Plaza Hotel at the Wrestling at the Chase. He'd get out there, and after he'd tear the place up, he'd grab somebody's beer and pour it on his head.
Yeah,
And he'd always, on his way back to the dressing room, he'd tell the people at the beer stand, he'd take him a beer, you know. But that was Dick.
yeah.
And
And I always thought that was an interesting mix because Sam was not really that kind of promoter. He didn't go for a lot of outside the ring stuff, but
well,
for somehow or another, he and Dick the Bruiser made it work.
stop and think the guys that did get to do that. Not many.
Right.
Dick was one. Brody was another. You know.
I know
Uh,
Terry Funk got in big trouble for it.
oh yeah, yeah. Terry said Terry, and he used to tell the story. He said, "I didn't think I'd ever go back to St. Louis." He said, "I love because they'll tell you if you made it to St. Louis, you made it to the big days
That's right.
because Chase Park Plaza was the place to be. And then even when they moved it over into the studio, it was still a hotbed because they knew Sam was knowing how to promote the business.
And he
And,
had
and
such, I mean, he had such high standards for the matches and the promotion. And there was only, I think, one or two times in his whole history where the card that he advertised, there wasn't a guy on it that he said only two times in that whole time.
yeah,
And
because they,
and he did things to make those two times right,
oh
with the
yeah,
fans.
guys wanted to work to St. Louis because one, like I said, they knew it. If your payoff come down to 87 cents at the end of that money, when you counted the bills, you had 87 cents in your envelope. You didn't have to go. It was none of this. Hey, I'll catch you next time, or it's a bad house tonight. Never happened. It's never happened with me
Yes.
because he told me you'll only do that once to the boy, and then you get a bad reputation. And if you lose your reputation in this business, you better go somewhere else because it will follow you forever. But I'm glad you brought up Dick because I'm starting to put some of. I got Dick's library that's still on the TV tape
Oh,
reels, as I told you.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
So I put one on. There was one on our show I think a week ago. I had Harley Race against Bobo Brazil,
Oh
and
man.
I've got one coming up this coming Sunday. I think is going to have the Crusher on it, and the Bruiser against Chuck Connor, and I can't remember who he's with. But so I'm starting to get those because they're still on the 1 inch tape, and it's
Yes.
hard to find. I found a place in St. Louis that will do it because they're still in the old metal. Some of them's in the old cardboard boxes that they used to transport back and forth to the TV stations,
Oh man.
and that's what happened in St. Louis. And that's the one fault that if Sam was still with us, I'd holler at him because he used to tape over those tapes
Yeah, a lot of the promoters did.
because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've got Dick's library, and I know there's some of it out there on the internet now. People can Google it because his wife had sold rights to it to different people. But I like the nostalgia because, like I said, it's still in the TV. It's got the dates that it was delivered to the TV station on it, and so I mean, I got a bunch of that. So um, I joke all the time and say when I leave this great earth, my wife is going to have the biggest bonfire ever, and because she ain't gonna know what to do with all of it, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of us out here that want to make sure that we go through all that and make sure that gets preserved. So let's
Yeah.
don't have the bonfire.
Yeah.
Boy,